Here in Beijing, I'm talking to Jurriaan Meyer. Two videos, how he got here, how he learned perfect Chinese, and how he is a bridge builder between China and Europe, and does a joint venture currently with light rail, with Structon, who is basically having a joint venture here in Beijing. And now I'm going to talk to him about trends in China. You know, all kinds of things we think of China and what is true and what is not true. We already talked about a couple of things in the previous video, for example IP, but let's repeat that. We think that China is about low quality, fast, and copying everything there is. I mean, how would you react to that?
I think that would be true for the situation 5 years ago, but China, in the first place, themselves don't want to be associated with that kind of attack. So China, the government is very eager to bring China up the value chain. So I think China will be and will remain the manufacturing place to be, but not for the low-end kind of manufacturing. So the cheapo things are already moving out of the country because salaries are high. Starting a company is expensive here. So the country.
You say the salaries here are higher than in Amsterdam?
Well, for well-paid white-collar people here in Beijing, where we are, absolutely. So the income gap between low-paid workers and white-collar workers is very big. It's bigger than in the Netherlands, absolutely.
Real estate is here more expensive than in Amsterdam, so you have to really get well-paid to basically be able to live here. But so it's not a cheap place anymore. So what is the advantage? So but first that IP stuff. You say that the government has draconian IP, anti-IP stealing measurement.
Yes, so this is under pressure from the World Trade Organization, but also actually from the reputation point of view, China doesn't want to be associated with these IP infringements. It still happens. But there's a lot of small factories who try to steal your products. You know, there is, for instance, a lot of beauty products and consumer products that are being copied and stolen. But there, you know, from the safety perspective, from the environment perspective, there's so many checks and balances now in China. It's very hard to make crap in China, actually from the Chinese government perspective. So I think that's a good thing. China is becoming a very mature market. The Chinese consumer wants to have very good stuff. So business to business, but also business to consumer. They want to have the best stuff. So the Chinese now are willing to buy Chinese products, which are high quality, where they wanted to buy foreign products before. So that automatically means that the Chinese want to create their own intellectual property, their own patents. They're investing big time in universities. They want to really become, technology-wise, a high-level player, high-quality player.
At the time of the DVDs, which are everywhere, you have to. They basically pay for content now, and they don't steal B2B everything.
The Chinese will eagerly pay for very good content. There is not many DVD stores anymore. They were shut down, and the only people who buy that stuff on the street corner is some tourists, right? Not the Chinese.
Okay. So they are now higher end, moving up. Make quality themselves, develop, design also a lot of things. They've made all kinds of vision 2025, right? That they say we need to have this technology in-house and make it ourselves.
Well, I think there's the challenge. So the vision is there. The government top-down, you know, promulgates sort of, you know, the vision 2025. But I think execution is everything. And because, as I said in another video, speed and making money in a short term is a priority. I think the long-term view to really invest in research and development is still lacking. That's difficult. So the whole education system and the whole mentality will need to change to really have a more quality-oriented, a more patient approach to, for instance, develop your own semiconductor industry, to develop your own even artistic content. That's another thing. You know, China is making a lot of movies, but even the Chinese are fed up with many of them because they're just crap. Some are really good. So it takes time to mature. And I think it takes a mentality change, but that is already starting. So the next generation of young people have already a completely different mindset than the big bosses of today.
Then another idea we have of China, that everything is paid with loans, and that the loans are bad and they will never be paid back, and that all the banks are full of crap, and that the whole financial system is going to collapse, and that nobody is ever going to get their money back.
I think what you're referring to is a very serious issue, is the shadow banking, because the state-owned banks don't give you a loan if you're not a state-owned company that is supposed to be very stable. So there is a big debt problem, state debt, provincial debt, local governments have it. But again, the government is very aware of this. So the NDRC, the National Development and Reform Committee, is really cracking down on these things. So they are cleaning out a lot of banks. Shadow banking is being culled. So I think it's good, you know, it's making it harder for companies to start up. So the money is not awash as it was before, But I think it's good. So the government here, I think it's very proactive in avoiding disasters. That is their number one directive.
And another idea, the quality of the state companies is horrible, and that it's just basically old bureaucrats are sitting on top of it, don't really know anything about the business. They're eating up a lot of money, and they make products which are not worth mentioning, and they are drag on the whole economy.
So that is the 1985 version of state-owned companies.
I'm really just giving you all the old ideas we have.
Those existed, and they were closed down in the 80s by Zhu Rongji. That was the prime minister that was installed by Deng Xiaoping. So he made a lot of people out of a job because he killed these completely obsolete companies. There is still a lot of state-owned companies that actually make good stuff, but I think their efficiency is still an issue. So I talked about the state-owned, railway companies like CRCC. They are a massive monopoly, and they could need some real foreign or domestic competition to really innovate and become, really better. But the state-owned companies are still the backbone of this economy because they create jobs, they create GDP, and to fully liberalize the economy is too big a risk for the.
Yeah, they don't like that. So they basically like liberate this, liberate that, but the core thing, there's one grid system. There's one grid system in China for 1.4 billion Chinese. And if you look at the 27 million cars which are created here, then the top 5 companies are state-owned, and they basically do 20 million of those 28. And then so it's really, but I also hear that to run a state company is a very competitive job nowadays for a party member, because a lot of that. But they really have to be successful and work well. Otherwise, you're being thrown out, or you're going to the end of the world.
Well, the jails with high party officials are overflowing with people, right? So it's very interesting what you mentioned. The economy and the government are just totally connected. So you're absolutely right. So you might be a party official in city A, but then you have to move to a state-owned company B. So you cannot just be a bureaucrat and sit there in a safe environment. No, you have to achieve KPIs. So KPIs is everything.
KPIs, and they're published on the website. What you have to produce.
Yes. So regardless, you are a party secretary, a mayor, or leading a state-owned bank, you are held to account on these KPIs. So it's a very stressful job. They don't get paid that much. They have not much opportunity to be corrupt because they have very strict rules how they do business, how they travel, with whom they interact. So they're cleaning up the job, and I'm a little bit worried that it could be so strict now that the most talented people don't want to work for the country anymore, because the country needs the most talented, right? So I think that's a sort of a wave. So the wave was, first there was a lot of corruption in the 90s and 2000s. Now it has been practically eliminated, and it has become too tight. So I hope there will be a new balance, that more private companies, like the ones I work with as well, have a little bit more space because they create the most value in the economy.
So that's another thing. So corruption, that was my next question. That's already been taken care of. So then let's go to the last one. The new emperor, President Xi, who basically was very known for cracking down corruption. So that is not just for that's just not for the public. It's really true in reality.
Oh, it's absolutely true, and it was important for the party to be legitimate, right? So they had to show that they have to crack down on this era. Before it was all business and everything went, it was sort of a...
It was capitalism without borders, and that the borders are there.
The borders are there because it is also affecting stability. So as I mentioned before, stability is important here. Stable growth, fair play. So they really want to create a stable environment for continued growth. And of course, legitimacy for the Communist Party. So if there is disrupting black swan kind of events, that is something we don't want to avoid. So that's why I think the current trade war is a big challenge for China. But I admire them because they stay cool. They take measures like lowering taxes. They are lowering a little bit the currency. So they're working the dials to offset, this pressure that is coming from Trump. And they will basically survive it. They know how to 吃苦, which means to take hardship. And they will survive. They have survived much worse things, and they will come out stronger. So I think the Trump approach is not the right way. I see a big chance for the European Union to create a more level playing field, where we have more chances against these state-owned operated companies. And China, I think, is open for that now. So I think we might enter a new era of productive cooperation with China, but it will take time, tough negotiations, and...
Don't underestimate their perseverance.
Oh, absolutely. But as I mentioned, China is a granite rock. You cannot circumvent it anymore. You have to deal with it in some form. They're there.
I met yesterday somebody who basically imports motorcycles in America, and they said, well, the first 25%, which was tariff, they took it. They basically lowered the price with 25%, and now it's been increased again with 5%, and now they get the first 2% increase in prices. So, I mean, they take a lot of hardship and forced productivity. They're not afraid. They are dealing with that. They're dealing with that. So, Xi, how do you view him from your perspective?
Well, I think Xi Jinping has created an enormous power base. So what he did is he really created this pyramid of power. So I think he's pretty much in control of the country.
Previous ones were much more bureaucrats, which were not very powerful and not very visible. He is really something different, right?
Quite different. The previous ones are also quite powerful, but it was more a collective kind of governance. And now it's more top-down with a very small team that does the whole thing. This obviously also brings more risks. Because if things go wrong, you know, currently there's a big problem with pork because of this swine flu. So they have the power.
80% of the pigs are basically dead.
Have been killed, yes. So everything that goes well goes into their account, but everything that goes wrong goes also that. So this gives him more power to change things quickly, but it also brings risks. And as I mentioned before, I think the Chinese are pretty happy with what he's doing so far, to be honest. But there is a little bit of resentment against, you know, it's a very tightened environment. So media, the internet, bureaucracy is very tightened. So it's very difficult to get licenses. Everything is cleaned up. Taxes are lowered, but it's more difficult, you know, to evade taxes. So on the one hand, it's getting clean, but on the other hand, you need a little bit of breathing space to allow economy to develop. So I think after the trade war, I'm quite optimistic China will loosen up a little bit and will grow fast again. And I think Xi Jinping is aware of this.
Yeah. Because how smart is he? Because I mean, we have this new book in Holland about the new emperor, but which describes his period. I mean, he looks like quite a smart guy.
Yes, but he will depend on a very smart team. So China always has been, for 5,000 years, a bureaucracy. So I have met some young people who work for the government, and you will be amazed how eloquent and how smart these people are. So they select the best and brightest. So you had the college entrance examination, you had the old examinations to enter the imperial household. So this system is still in place to filter out the best and brightest to work with the government. So that is absolutely, so China has an enormous reservoir of very talented people. That's the biggest risk for us in Europe, you know, and in the West. And what I like about the Chinese, this is my favorite proverb, in China there's a lot of problems, but there is many, many more solutions. They have a solution for everything. Even in my job, if there's a problem, they create a solution. And this is the reason I'm here, because I think, okay, this is now the concrete wall, here it stops. No, there's always a new solution.
That's true.
China moves forward.
So let's go into a little bit about what you just said. The best people from the university. The Communist Party has 80 million people, right? And democracy, it's not a democracy, but the Communist Party are the eyes and the ears of the people. And I met some communist members also in my group, and she was the best. She was the best of the class. She was invited to be part of the Communist Party. You have to be invited, and she was really smart. And she told me about that she basically tells all kinds of things which need to be changed, and it goes into the system of the Communist Party. How would you describe this Communist Party?
Well, what the Communist Party has achieved is something remarkable. They achieved the trinity of the Communist Party, the state of China, and the people of China. Actually, these three things are completely different, obviously, but they molded together. So the lady you just described I think, is a typical example also of the pragmatism of Chinese. If you are a Communist Party member, doesn't mean that you like everything that the party promulgates or teaches. It's number one, it's a ticket to well-paid jobs in the government, but it also gives you a big network. A lot of my best friends are a party member, and it's not like we think in the West.
It's a tool.
Yeah, it's a tool. They're not necessarily brainwashed. They have access. In my company, there is an office just next to my office, and it's reserved for the local party secretary who sits there a couple of days a week to observe our project. So in the beginning I said, well, what is enlightened doing? But I invited her to my meetings, and she is now supporting us. She's helping us with subsidies. So she's making a career by learning about our technology. It's her next career move. And she has the entry points to help us getting the subsidies. It's just very pragmatic. That's how it works.
The government looks extremely entrepreneurial and also has a lot of rules, and the rules are also being implemented but also are flexible. What do you think of laws and judges and courts and the rule of law? How is that in China?
Well, that is a very sensitive topic. I think the Chinese themselves are sometimes not happy how the rule of law is enforced. There is a lot of laws in China, and they're actually pretty good. They're very good, they're at Western standards, but the enforcement is everything. So if you go into the political arena, the laws were always used against you if you wanted to criticize the government. That's very easy. But even in daily life, it's very difficult to make a win. But I have to say, even then, if you have an IP dispute or you have a dispute in court, there is people who win. You know, it's not like it's totally, you know, arbitrary or at the hands of the government. But obviously, there is no separation of power between, you know, the government, the executive, and the law. So that is how it is in China, and that leaves its footprint.
My impression is if you live in China and you are sort of in the mainstream, you're not doing crazy things, or you're not a minority with a different religion which has all kinds of... If you're not there, then it's okay to live there. If you are outside the box, it's not easy.
Well, that is interesting, because it also is a limitation, right? So some very rich business people, they're also exposed, because if they become too powerful, you know, Jack Ma just stepped down, but he's moving to the background because, you know, he might be too powerful. So I think the government needs, this is also what I mean, should give a lot of more confidence and trust in their people, that they not will be toppled or something, but to give them more space to be entrepreneurial. But they are really doing this. They are, for instance, also encouraging young people to start startups, to keep them off the streets. They don't want to have those fresh graduates lingering around doing nothing, so they get subsidies to start something, to do something. So purpose is really important here. And that's why most of Chinese are actually still very optimistic about China.
Last subject is why we are here in China was electric mobility. We saw all these 21,000 taxis in Shenzhen, and the electric buses, and especially all the scooters which are gone. Everything is electric bikes and electric scooters, and it's wonderful because the city is quiet. How have you seen that grow in the last 10 years?
Well, I'm in sustainable transportation as well, so I think the environment has become very important, because many people here want to have a healthy environment for their kids. So this is something, yesterday there was a news item on Yahoo that said that Beijing is moving out of the top 20 of most polluted cities. So within 5 to 10 years they cleaned up their act, and the electrical mobility is part of that. Number two, I think it's also an industry that China is ahead of the curve. They have technology that is new, it's giving them national pride, so why not? It's a win-win situation. So I think what China is teaching us is that building sustainable solutions, also solar power, wind power, electric mobility, is helping the economy, cleaning up the environment, and creating jobs. So I think that is what they are doing, and that's why I think they will be a very interesting partner for the West on that. Yeah.
And they can be number one, right? In normal cars they cannot be number one, but in electric cars they can become number one.
Well, number one, what does number one mean? I think in terms of production and efficiency they could be number one, but in terms of R&D we still have a big advantage in Europe, in Germany and in France and even the Netherlands. We have a lot of technology. Yes, of course. R&D is difficult still in China because there's no patience and there's not enough talent to have really genuine domestic technology. That is still a challenge, and that is the 2025 program to change that.
Can we still compete with the Chinese? They only have solutions. They work incredibly hard. They're smart. They're now a brand. They think about branding and high-end doing business. They're thinking about innovation. Can we in Europe, do we still have the chance to compete with them when they are ready with their internal market and they basically come to us?
Of course we can. So this is really important. This is the specter that is hanging over everybody in the West. So this is the fearful thinking about China. I think we should see China more as a partner, a very tough partner. But once you show strength and you push back, you know they will respect you. There is no reason to be pessimistic about our future. Again, our R&D is strong. our creativity is strong, our quality levels are strong. Thinking out of the box from the educational point of view still remains a strong point because China is not innovating on that point yet for several reasons. So there's so many advantages we have. I just find it very odd that the communication lines between China and the West are very thin. There's very few people who really can connect. And that's, I think...
English becomes less important here, eh?
Yes, because they're focusing on the domestic market. So English is actually almost evaporating outside of the big cities. And this is a disadvantage to the Chinese to do business abroad. So many opportunities, but so many communication problems on the governance level, political level, but even people to people. And I think there is a fantastic opportunity for Europe to be in touch, to work with China, but on a fair playing field. I'm not saying we should bow to the emperor or to China. So we need to recalibrate that relationship together as one European Union. And then I think there's a long prosperity curve for us all.
So we talked for a long time about China trends. We covered a little bit because, I mean, China is so big, there's so many realities, but at least you have some idea. I think if you heard these things, you have some idea what to think about China, and good luck with discovering the rest of that incredible country. Thank you very much, Jurriaan.
Thank you very much, Vince.